Hi all, in this video I am going to show you how to cut your mat board using our mat cutter. This is a tricky video to capture within the screen of my camera, but I've hopefully set out a position that gives you a lot of good information. When you see in the mat cutter in real life, you will see that there are sliding cutting blade that moves along this rail, and it actually has two holders for the blades that cut. So there's a beveled cutter from my point of view. Now you're going to find that on the left side. But it's pretty obvious that it moves in to the mat board at about a 30-degree angle. On the other side, we have a square cutting blade that goes and will enter into the mat board, exactly at 90 degrees to that cutting surface, straight down. And that's the side we're going to use first. You use that square cutting side to cut the outer edges of the mat board, that full mat dimension, and then you use the beveled cutting side, sorry, I hope you can see this, to cut the interior window. I'll show you how to do that in the next video. But let's go ahead and we will cut the largest dimension, that full height and full width of our mat board. Here we go. So the first thing that you probably will need to do is you'll have to make sure that we have a blade in the side that we want to cut with. These mat cutters have a single carriage, which is this little metal slide that slides into both cutting slides, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So if you come in towards the back of this little blade holder, you'll see a shiny metal rectangle. That's going to be our carriage for our blade. And there's a knob that sticks straight out of the side. This is to the right side of, in this case, the square cutting carriage. If I was removing this from the beveled side, it would be the sort of same rules, but we have our knob coming out to the left. But you're going to loosen it. Loosening this knob, rotating it, allows it's a little threaded bolt, and it will release the tension, allowing you to pull the blade carriage out from the back of that cutting slide. All right, then what you're going to do is you're going to just sort of check the blade. The blade should be projecting out. Its sharp edge is on the bottom. It's a regular sort of razor blade, all right? And it can slide into its own slot. If others have cut mats, 2 or 3 people have all cut mats before you, what I might recommend is taking that blade out, flipping it, and sliding it back into the carriage in a nice fresh direction. That ensures that you're going to have a nice clean sharp blade for your matting process. I'll also show you where fresh blades are located in the classroom and how to dispose of them when I do my live demo during class. All right, so this is a nice sharp blade. I can slide it out and then simply slide it back into its own slot. On the back of this carriage is another threaded knob, and it applies tension to the back of the blade. So if you turn that knob in, you can get the blade to stick out further. Pulling the knob back and giving a small push, not on the blade, but at the front end, or not on the cutting edge, but the front edge of that blade, allows it to move back. We're kind of aiming for just enough blade to be able to cut through our mat board. Sometimes that takes a little bit of trial and error. Usually if you have it sticking out about 1/4 of an inch, that's a pretty good position for it. Later, you'll be cutting your foam core with this blade as well, and for that you'll want it sticking much further out. You'll likely have that knob tension all the way up, and you may even allow yourself to pull the blade a little bit further out like that for the mat board. Okay. I'll be showing you the map or the foam core later and giving you more instructions. The big rule is if you ever feel the blade scraping the middle of the mat cutter at any point, you want to immediately stop and readjust. That means your blade is either very misaligned and it's hitting one of the sides, or it is out too far and it's hitting the bottom of the channel of our mat cutter, both of which we don't want. If you're hitting the bottom of the channel, it's just a matter of pulling that blade back a little bit so that doesn't happen. If it is misaligned, you might want to pull Donna or me into the mix to see if we can analyze the problem. There may be other tightening we have to do. All right, but once you have that blade back in the carriage, the tension tightened on the back, we're going to slide it in to the square side of that cutting slide. All right, and just for more reference, the square side is on the narrower side of our mat cutter, closer to the hinges, which will make sense when you see it in person. All right, so if we start sliding this into its carriage, it actually can just about slide all the way through. What we want is we want the silver edge of this cutting carriage it has an angle that we want to perfectly align with the same kind of angle which is on our cutting slide. So you want the silver not sticking out, just aligning exactly with the same angle. I think you might be able to see. So here's what it would look like if it was sticking out. As I pull it back in line, you can see that silver essentially kind of disappears from view, and that's the point that we're going to go ahead and tighten our knob, again locking that sliding carriage in place. All right, and then we'll set ourselves up to make the first cut. The lowest layer on the mat cutter, we always want to place a little bit of scrap mat board. I have tons of this left over from other matting projects available in our classroom. So we want to lay it so it lays over the channel where we are going to be cutting our mat board. Then what we'll do is we will be laying our mat board over top. There's a large liftable handle that you're going to lift up. It's a straight edge also that helps align and guide our sliding blade, but it also kind of provides a little bit of weight to help hold the mat board in place as we cut. Although holding the mat board yourself is still important, which I'll show you. But we have this, the way we have it is we lay down the scrap board first in a position where nothing has been cut on it before. Then we lay down our mat board that we want to cut, and what this allows for is it allows the blade, after it moves through our mat board that we want to cut, the blade moves into this scrap board, which keeps the bottom edge of our mat very clean and sharp. And because pushing that blade through can cause a little bit of tearing because of the impact and just kind of the brute force it takes to get the blade to move through the layers of mat board. So any of that rough tearing occurs on the scrap piece of mat board, not on your mat, if we have that under layer. So that's a very important step. It's particularly important when we cut the window, but it's good practice for every step. All right. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to then align your drawn edge of your mat dimension. So I'm going to be cutting the height line first with this square edge. And the mat cutter is designed for its edge of the mat cutter to exactly set the track of where the blade's going to cut on. However, there's always a little tiny bit of distance between the track you see and where the blade actually enters. So before we start cutting, we do our best to get that board to align. You can make adjustments by just lifting the handle again on this big long straight rule that guides our cutting slide. All right. So that can lift up vertically, and then you can adjust your mat board until the line you drew, the edge line you drew, aligns with that mat board cutting edge. But then we actually go through and do a little test to make sure that our blade is going to hit the line exactly for the entire length of our cut. So what we do is I get my head way down here. You can see my eyeball. Maybe you'll see my nose in the video, so that I can see the tip of the blade, of my cutting blade, and I can see the line that I've drawn on my mat board. And to get the blade to cut on my line, what I'm going to do, I'll do this outside just so you can see, is if you push straight down at the top of that slide, it plunges the blade down, and the more pressure you put on it, plunges it deeper into the mat board to get a nice full cut. But for now, what we're going to do is I'm just going to track along the line, and every once in a while, I'm not going to plunge my blade in to my line yet, but I'm just going to, with my head very close so I can see where the tip enters and hits the line, make sure that that tip of the mat cutter blade is touching the line that I want it to, in the same place all the way down. So in my first test here, I am hitting the line. I'm not hitting the center of the line. I'm kind of on the inside edge. So I'm going to correct that a little bit before I move on. I'm going to lift the handle and just pull it out my mat board just a tiny bit, so that the line sits just a tiny bit further to the right of the blade. And I'm going to look again. Here's my eyeball. I'm way down here. Oh, I overshot it. I'm going to pull it back in. Push it back to the left. Oh, now I'm happy. Now my mat cutting blade appears to be hitting right dead center on the line that I wanted. so far all the way down. Keep in mind that as you pull in and out, you could send it a little bit wonky, so you might have to just adjust towards the bottom or just to touch the top. And that's why we go and do that little careful plunge test all the way down. All right, I feel like my blade is aligned and I'm ready to make my first cut. So what I'm going to do is, again, my eyeballs very close to the mat cutter and the blade so I can see. All right, I am going to put my other hand in front, holding the handle or the edge of the handle of the mat cutter, just to help ensure that it doesn't move. It can also be nice if you have a friend around to have them hold the mat cutter to make sure it doesn't move as you cut. All right. And now what I'm going to do is I am looking very carefully at the cut, and I'm going to plunge the blade all the way in at exactly the corner where my height line meets my width line, this upper right corner of the mat. I've plunged it all the way down. I can feel that it's gone through that mat board and probably gone all the way through the under mat board that I put down. And now, with very good control and even pressure, I'm actually going to hold the mat board. I'm going to pull all the way down until I exit that mat board, and you can see I've gotten a nice clean cut. At this point, I would sort of lift this and make sure that I've cut all the way through. If I haven't cut all the way through, I would take my carriage out, adjust the position of the blade, actually, so that it projects out just a little bit further, and then come give it another pass. It's easy to get the blade right back in the channel.